Everyone keeps talking about a 20 or 30 billion pound budget black hole, but that number is almost comforting because it's nowhere near the real problem. The truth is, Britain isn't facing a hole. It's facing a sinkhole, slow, widening, and mostly hidden beneath the surface. If you're serious about understanding where this country is actually heading and what needs to change, watch this video to the very end, because once you see the full picture, you'll never hear budget crisis the same way again. The black hole that doesn't show up in the headlines. The official debate focuses on short-term gaps, a few billion here, a few billion there. But the real financial strain on the UK isn't about this year's budget. It's about unfunded promises, pensions that will be paid decades from now, buildings that are already crumbling, infrastructure that's been patched instead of fixed, contracts signed years ago that still demand payments today. All of this is happening while economic growth is weaker, the population is aging, and fewer people are working relative to those who aren't. This isn't a shock crisis. It's a slow-burning one. The prison system, a warning sign we ignored. When prisoners were mistakenly released early, it shocked people. But it shouldn't have. Since 2008, the justice system has been one of the hardest hit areas of austerity. By 2020, spending was 24% lower than in 2007, and nearly a third lower per person. The result? Overcrowded prisons, low staff morale, crumbling facilities, rising reoffending rates. A parliamentary report suggested 75% of prisons were inadequate or failing to improve. To fix the immediate crisis alone would cost £1.8 billion, and that doesn't touch the court backlog or long-term decay. And here's the key point. If this was the only system breaking, it would be fixable, but it isn't. Local councils, where the system is already collapsing. Local councils are quietly becoming the epicenter of the crisis. They were hit hard by austerity, funding slashed, while simultaneously being handed legal obligations they cannot refuse. Adult social care, temporary housing for the homeless, special educational needs provision. Social care costs are exploding as the population ages. Homelessness, and especially temporary accommodation, has surged, with the UK among the worst globally. And special needs education has risen sharply, with councils legally required to fund placements, even when transport costs alone run into millions. The result? Councils providing services without the money to pay for them. Many are already bankrupt in everything but name. Benefits, mental health, and a quiet time bomb. Since 2016, children receiving disability benefits have doubled. Mental health claims among young people have surged. Health-related benefits are rising rapidly. Spending on incapacity and disability benefits is heading toward £98 billion, but even that is small compared to what's coming next. Pensions, the real giant in the room. This is where the math becomes brutal. The ratio of retired people to working-age adults is set to rise from 25 to 45 per 100 over coming decades. At the same time, state pensions are rising faster than wages. Pension spending will take a larger share of GDP. Private pensions are increasingly unreliable. The UK state pension is actually low by European standards, which means people rely heavily on private pensions to survive. But many fall through the cracks. The self-employed low earners, those without consistent contributions, and there's a new problem no one planned for. A generation of retirees paying market rent. Home ownership is falling. Rents are rising. Housing costs eat up over 40% of income for millions, one of the highest rates in the world. That pressure eventually lands back on the state. Public sector pensions and the infrastructure debt. Another hidden cost, public sector pensions. Estimates vary wildly. Some suggest future promises worth trillions. The Treasury argues the real present cost is lower. But even on conservative figures, these pensions require huge employer contributions. And the employer is the taxpayer. Then there's infrastructure. The NHS waiting list is over 7 million, despite spending increases. Maintenance backlogs have doubled in a decade. Across the entire public sector, the National Audit Office estimates a £49 billion maintenance backlog. During austerity, capital spending was often cut first because the damage doesn't show immediately. Instead, governments turn to PFI contracts, bad value, long-term obligations, 160 billion pounds still to be paid on deals that delivered only 57 billion pounds in assets. Energy, defense, and debt interest. The pressure multiplies. Now add what's coming next. The energy transition will require massive grid investment. Even if electricity generation gets cheaper, network costs and subsidies mean higher bills in the short to medium term. Climate change itself will reduce GDP through insurance costs and volatility. Defense spending is rising again, at the same time as health spending, something post-war Britain never had to do. And then there's debt interest. The UK is increasingly dependent on overseas investors. UK pension funds are buying fewer government bonds. Less demand means higher yields. The Office for Budget Responsibility expects £22 billion a year more in interest costs, just from structural changes. That money buys nothing. So what happens next? All major spending areas are rising. Health pensions, benefits, defense debt interest. But the economy isn't growing fast enough to support them. Taxes are already historically high. Wealth taxes, even optimistic ones, raise too little to matter at this scale. Will the UK go bankrupt? No, but what's coming is something quieter and harder. Stretched services, private alternatives replacing public ones. A long period of muddling through we're already seeing it. NHS dentists disappearing, social care gaps widening, councils collapsing. And yet, Britain still has real strengths. World-class institutions, deep capital markets, innovation, services, and talent. But fixing this isn't about pretending the hole is small. It's about admitting how deep it really is, in choosing long-term solutions over short-term comfort. If you want honest conversations about where the economy is heading and how real change actually happens, subscribe, share this video, and stay curious. Because the first step to fixing the future is seeing it clearly.